Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say welcome from the MGAA to SQL, and our speakers today, Tim Rayner, Dex Bransby, and Marc Bloom. Today's webinar is introducing Lloyd's Coverholder Workbench, what it means for the MGAA membership, today, Thursday, June 10th, 2021. So first of all, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping points, if I may. So I'm just going to share my screen. So as I say, we're introducing the Lloyd's Coverholder Workbench and what it means for the MGAA membership. So I'd just like you to please mute your microphone and your camera. Make sure both are off. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, but if we don't get time to answer your questions, our team at SQL will be happy to answer these post-event. This event is accredited for CPD points, and you can upload those if they are relevant to your learning and development programme. In addition, the video will be available on our website and available on our YouTube channel post-event. Also, if I might ask you to complete our feedback survey, which will be sent post-event, your views are extremely valuable to us and it does allow us to give the best opportunity to provide content and quality events to our MGAA membership. So I'd like to hand over to Tim Rayner, if I may. Tim is Chief Experience Officer at SQL. He spent 18 years on the broker side of the London market at Miller and has a strong technology background with over 15 years experience as a software developer, before moving on to heading up IT change and then group operations at Miller. At SQL, Tim has board-level responsibility for SQL's relationship with Lloyds, the Lloyds market TOM, and large strategic accounts. Looking forward, Tim will play an instrumental part in SQL's global expansion and brings a wealth of experience, particularly in the coverholder space, having architected London's first real-time bordereau data exchange back in 2007. So Tim, if I might hand over to you.
That's great. Many thanks, Julia, and thank you for welcoming SQL and Lloyds today. So I've got with me Marc Bloom and Dex Bransby from Lloyds, and I'll hand over to Marc initially to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marc Bloom. I'm the head of global operations at Lloyds, and I was am the business owner and business sponsor for the Coverholder Workbench. I've been at Lloyds for about 5 years now. Prior to Lloyds, I was with Catlin. Prior to Catlin, I was with a large U.S. carrier and Deloitte. So I will kind of kick it over to Dex, who's the product manager for Coverholder Workbench.
Thanks, Marc. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see so many of you with us today. I'm Dex Bransby. I work within Marc's team within global operations as a stakeholder manager. 3 years in the market, initially working as stakeholder manager, setting up Lloyds Europe. Then on to Part 7 with the transfer of business from Lloyds London across to Europe, and now as Marc says, product owner for Coverholder Workbench, which is what we're going to be speaking about today, including a demo that I'll be running you through. Over to you, Tim.
That's great. Thanks, Marc and Dex, and most importantly, thank you for joining us today with the MGA to give their members the overview of Coverholder Workbench. So as a polite reminder, please share any questions via chat. And we're keen to make this as interactive as possible and answer all the different interest points as we go through the presentation and the demo that Dex has talked about. So Marc, if I could start with you, if you could give us a high-level overview of Coverholder Workbench and why it was created, that would be a great start, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tim. So the genesis of the Coverholder Workbench was about 3+ years ago, where we partnered with SQL to develop something that could be a turnkey solution for cover holders. Not just cover holders in the UK, but global cover holders. The thinking being that there's probably 2 or 3 parts of this. The first is we didn't want an investment in technology to necessarily be a barrier to entry for cover holders. So we thought having a turnkey system that was provided the necessary benefits, necessary functionality, and was reasonably priced would be an asset for the market. The second part of it was for those cover holders who might have been established but were looking for a new technology or a transitional technology. So we thought that having a tool or something that could transition cover holders from technology A to technology B would be beneficial to the market. The third part actually was an interesting development. Initially, the idea was that we would just sort of focus on smaller to mid-sized cover holders for Coverholder Workbench. But as we started talking to cover holders, it became apparent that there are larger cover holders who had a need for a way to get into a particular line of business quickly. While they were getting their internal system sorted, they could get onto something like the Coverholder Workbench fairly quickly, the barrier to entry being small and quick, and it was a quick entry, quick exit. So it would help them transition into a new line of business if they did an acquisition or something like that. So that was kind of the genesis of the thoughts around Coverholder Workbench. And that's kind of what brings us to today.
That's great. Thank you, Marc. And could you elaborate on the overall delegated authority sort of cover holder journey and how Coverholder Workbench relates to other market initiatives?
So as everyone's heard, we've got Future at Lloyds, Blueprint 2, all kinds of things. Delegated business is a critical aspect of Lloyds. I think I'm kind of pretty an obvious statement there. Where the Coverholder Workbench will fit in is basically part of an entire DA ecosystem. So you've got DDM at one end, and then you've got sort of coverholder systems at the front end. And the idea is that the Coverholder Workbench will squarely fit within that kind of ecosystem of DA solutions. And over time, it will kind of get a bit more integrated with the other DA ecosystem components, DDM, DCOM. As you've heard about those, I can answer some questions on those later if you like. So the idea is that the Coverholder Workbench just becomes part of the ecosystem. It is not intended to replace the SQL product, for example. If someone has a need for the entire suite of SQL products, or, sorry, Tim, any of SQL's competitors, fits in quite well, fine. We're agnostic about it. Coverholder Workbench is just part of the solution set.
That's great. So hand over to you now, Dex. It'd be great if you could give us a demo of the platform, talk us through who can use it, workflow management, document production, etc. So I'll ask you to share your screen and take us through the application, please.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So I am going to be covering off for about the next 20 minutes the application itself. Going through the journey that a typical underwriter would go through from submission through to policy completion and the steps involved with that using the Workbench system. Before I share my screen and take a look at the environment, I want to just cover the criteria. So who can use the Lloyds Coverholder Workbench system? So as we've heard, it is a Lloyds branded policy management system. And it's intended for use by Lloyds approved cover holders, MGAs, and appointed representatives, both new and existing. It's aimed at those really in need of an alternative system or new entrants that may not have one. So if you are a cover holder stroke MGA that is using multiple systems where you're having to rekey a lot from your policy system into schedules and certificates of insurance, and then further downstream into bordereau, it takes a lot of those frustrations away. It's aimed at people that are writing both direct insurance through a Lloyds binder and FAC RE as well through a binder. We can do facultative reinsurance. The binders themselves can be 100% led with a Lloyds syndicate, or they can be a subscription market. So we can have multiple Lloyds syndicates, and we also support non-Lloyds paper as well and company stamps. So whilst it is a Lloyd's branded system, we can support the company markets as well. Okay, so that's really who it's aimed at and who can use it. So I'm now going to just share my screen with you, so you can see the front end of the Workbench system. And the first thing that I'm going to cover off is the workflow management. So if I log in to the system, we will go through into the demonstration environment. If we go into workflow management, we'll let this come up. I will just apply the filters just to make it easier for you to see this. So this is the workflow management area, and these blocks and different colors that you can see are pieces of in-flight work that a cover holder, fictitious cover holder that we've made up here in the environment is working on. And it's logical steps that I'm sure won't be of any surprise to you. So it's things like insured's awaiting approval. Okay, you've got a new client, you've got a new insured, you need to capture their information. We then come on to capturing rating data. Okay, now this is where we would take examples of the question set that you're using and the rating matrix, if you'd like the system to auto rate, and we will come on to that. And we build the product out for you so that you can answer questions and capture data to price accordingly, and also so that any mapping data can be pulled through to schedules, to certificates, to invoices, and downstream reporting as well into Bordereau. And we move along. We create quotes. We get those quotes and we send them out. We can have multiple quotes. We go through the stages of applying applicable taxes and fees, which we'll see. It then sits in a pending client review area. So we've sent our quotes out either directly to the insured or to a retail broker, or indeed, if it's a prior submit binder, back to a syndicate for review. At this stage, subjectivities can be discussed and added to the risk. The price can be adjusted. Any supporting information can be requested and uploaded to the system, so that there's an evidence trail or an area where any audits can be conducted. And it then moves along. So if anything's referred, it gets cleared. We then come to the stage where we are actually selecting the quote that we want to book, bind in the system. We capture any pre-bind data. This is quite a key point because the system's been designed so that the initial data capture for you to generate a quote is quite light. And so you can get that quote out fast. At the pre-bind stage, you go through either a lengthy or it could be a short process, depending on the data that you've captured at the front end, to record that data that's missing. Okay? Now that could be for schedule, or indeed it could be for any downstream reporting to ensure that the bordereau is correct. Once we've gone through that stage, we capture the billing data. So we've got the ability within Workbench to create invoices or debit notes. So we need some data for that, and that will include a breakdown of the premium and any taxes and fees. And we then issue the documentation out to the client. And we use a tool or technology called Rulebook to create the documentation on behalf of the user. This can be both static wordings, so wordings that remain the same for each policy that you're issuing out, and dynamic wording as well. So any data that you're capturing at the front end that then triggers dynamic wording in the documentation that you need to issue to the client can be mapped through. You're not having to re-enter it each time in order to create the compliant policy documentation. That could be a a simple declaration form, or it could be a full certificate with multiple schedules and jackets wrapping around. We take the templates, we take examples of the documentation you're using and build that out so that it reflects what you need. And then finally, renewals. Okay, we've got an auto wake-up function within Coverholder Workbench so that 30, 60, 90 days in advance of the policy's natural or endorsed expiry date, a piece of work will pop up to the user, as in the underwriter, to say, hey, we need to do something with this. We need to quote terms for next year well in advance of the expiry date. This is a very intuitive area. The filters you can apply can either give you a snapshot like I've got here for an individual, or indeed a picture of the whole business. So senior underwriters can get a view of what's going on. So what I'm going to do is, in true Blue Peter fashion, is pick up where I left off earlier with a quote that was created. So I'll open this up and just expand so you can see this. So as you can see along the top, we've got a number of steps: basic details, product details, quote details, finalizing the quote, policy finalization, and then complete. So the steps that I've gone through already, just to save time, are the basic details. So I have selected a product, and in this case, this was a GL, a general liability product, for a it's actually for a surplus lines cover holder in the US, but I will go through with it. I've selected my broker, who I'm working with, and I've also selected the insured, the lead insured, because we need that information either for the documentation or for the downstream reporting. Okay. As part of the onboarding, any relationships that you have with existing brokers, we can take their details, take the details from the TOBA, and create them in the system, so you're not having to enter their details each time. And there is a possibility as well for a bulk upload of insureds. I then went through the question set. Okay, things like inception, expiry dates, deductibles, excesses, entering turnover for the business, number of employees, etc., etc. It's data that was required for this particular product. And for any cover holder that we onboard, we ensure that the product that is built for them reflects the data capture that they need, either to price accordingly, or for the downstream reporting onto the bordereau, or combination of both. During the quote or the rating and the quoting stage, the workbench has got the ability to auto-rate products for you. And what I mean by auto-rate is return a technical price. Okay? So what we do is, if the customer wants this, we will take an example of the rating matrix, and that is normally in an Excel document with various different drop-downs or manual entries that the cover holder is using to generate the technical price. What you then do with that technical price depends on the permissions. You can weight, discount the product, or you can completely override the price and just manually enter the premium if you don't want the system to auto-rate. Okay? So that's the stage I'm at to now. I've got a price that the system's returned. So I'm going to go into this price and show you how we would apply any applicable taxes and deductions. Okay. So we'll go in and apply some deductions. Now, if these deductions, for example, your cover holder commission if they don't vary from risk to risk, the fixed amount or fixed rates, then of course you won't have to do this every time. We'll set the system up so that it's done automatically. But I'm going to say for this particular risk, as the cover holder, making 15 points on the premium, which is going to be cover holder commission. So let's get back. Then that's 15 points. Okay. If there is anything else, let's say there is brokerage, retail brokerage, if that's not included in the cover holder commission, we can apply that as well. I think I will just leave those two on there. If there are any additional deductions that you work off, again, we can build them in for you. And now we come on to the taxes. Okay, so Coverholder Workbench has been designed so that appropriate applicable taxes can be applied to the risk, depending upon the risk location or locations. So if it's quite simple, if it's a risk that you're writing within the UK and you've determined that the risk location is 100% UK, then the system will know that, and the UK IPT will be applied. If you are writing risks throughout Europe, across cross-border, then providing we get a heads up during the onboarding of the locations that you're writing your risks, then we can set the system up so that you select the taxes that are applicable, which reflect the tax schedule that you've got. So I'm just going to apply a tax here so we can see how it works. Of, let's say it's $50, and apply that to the risk. I'm going to save these. So then moves to the ready to buy stage. And we can see that we now have a option to send to the client. So what I'm going to do is exactly that. I'm going to send this quote out to the client. We get an email screen with some wording here. This is dynamic. You can change this if you need to. With two documents, the original quote and the quote that's now been revised with our deductions and taxes. So we can go in and actually have a look at these to see how the system has generated them. So that you can review before you actually send out.
During the configuration process, we can set these up to have your logos or look the way you need it to look.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. The branding will mimic yours, and we can build this out as well. This is a very simple quote document with just the price and the taxes. You'll note that the commissions are not visible on the quote, for info only. And if you've already got, I know a lot of you do, some statement of facts, wordings that need to appear on the quote document, we'll build them out, providing we get the template, and they can all be there. So it's quite a lengthy quotation form if that's what you're using. So come out of there and go back to the overview. I'm going to select that quote, send it out. What happens now is it moves to the pending client review area on the workflow. So in theory, come out of this now, work on another risk, and come back to this at the appropriate stage. This is where any comments can now be added. You've got a list here of emails that were sent from the system. We've got system generated documents here. Any other documents that you need to attach that have been requested or that are required can be dragged and dropped in here, including emails. There is a timeline of who did what when. Again, this is helpful if someone else is picking this work up on your behalf. What we're going to assume now is that we've received a response. It's quite a simple packaged risk that you're writing very often, so there is no problem with the wordings and the level of cover, and the broker has come back to say, yeah, happy with that, we'd like to go ahead. So I'm going to go in to the quote. Select the quote that's been agreed. We could have multiple quotes here where you've gone back, adjusted the level of cover in order to generate a competing price, or indeed if you've got another binder with the same product with different insurers, you can go back and you can create quotes to review off against each other. I'm going to select this quote as the one that I'd like to buy and go ahead and buy. Now this is this pre-bind data stage that we were talking about earlier. So the data capture at the front end was deliberately light. If there is now data that's required for the purpose of the bordereau or for the schedule that you didn't capture at the front end, this is where you enter it. Okay. So no. Go bind. We now have a review of the deductions and taxes. This is purely because more often than not for risks that are spanning across multiple countries and territories, the tax schedule doesn't always come with the submission. So you can go back and you can enter any of the taxes that are applicable. And once we are happy with that, got a disclaimer here to say that we are. We go confirm. The system is now booking business. And now we come on to the invoicing. Okay. So a few dates here that we just check that we're happy with. The advice date for the invoice when we're sending it out, when we're expecting to get paid, and if relevant, the underwriter settlement due date. More often than not, this isn't relevant to the cover holder, the Lloyd's broker that's interested in this. Settlement currency as well, what you're expecting to get paid in. And we then move on to the actual policy documentation. So similar to the quotation stage, where we're getting those generated, automated on an automated basis, same thing happens now with the policy documentation. So that's now dropped in, and any static wordings will be there if they are the same for each of your product lines. And any dynamic wording as well would have been mapped through now, depending upon the data capture that you made at the front end. You'll note there as well that the invoice has just popped in as well. So let's take a look at these before we send them out. So let's take a look at the invoice first. So we've now got the total due from the insured. In this particular example, the commission's there. Doesn't have to be there. We can configure the system so that, again, that similar to the quotation, that is for info only. But more often than not, you will need to create the invoice with the premium breakdown, including any taxes. And that's what you get from Coverholder Workbench. Of course, you then have your terms of payment. Could be a full one-off payment if it's an annual policy. If you're working off open policies and you're endorsing, or you need installments, then we can do that for you. Close that one down and take a look at the actual policy document. So in this environment, we are creating a standard Lloyd certificate for insurance that has been underwritten by Lloyd syndicates. If you are writing business in Europe and you're going through the Lloyd's entity in Brussels, then this will be a certificate that's issued on behalf of Lloyd's Insurance Company SA, which is the Lloyd Europe entity, okay, with the appropriate wordings that are applicable for that certificate. So this will be built out according to your needs. Static wordings, dynamic wordings will be there. You'll have the schedule. This is obviously very simple because I haven't captured much data in order to generate the price here for the demonstration purposes. But the schedule or schedules will be mapped across into the documentation. If you do need to make any changes to the documentation, that's relatively straightforward as well. You can download from the Workbench system, make those changes, and then re-upload to Workbench so that you've got the final version of the truth. Okay. And there's a LMA clause as well there, which was applicable for the US. Again, standard clauses we can get in for you. Come out of that, go back to the overview. I want to send the invoice and I want to send the policy document out to the client. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, yes, we have actually sent it out. And that is a completed policy now. Okay, so as far as the system's concerned, that is a live risk if the inception date was today, and it will drop off that workflow tool that we saw earlier, the Kanban. It won't reappear unless you either kick off a endorsement within the Workbench system, which you can do, and you go through a similar process to the one we went through just now, or it's time for renewal, and it appears in your renewal area, so you know you need to do something with it. Now, a few things happen in the background now. You've completed the policy. One of the things is around the bordereau, so the risk bordereau, and the data is mapped across to the risk bordereau for the particular binder you've bound this business for, and it creates that line or multiple lines if it's a property risk or an A&H risk, and you need multiple lines there. That's all pulled through, and then in theory you can go and run that bordereau. It doesn't have to be at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, traditional reporting periods. You can run a bordereau at any time. If you are comfortable with your managing agent or lead underwriter having access to the system as well, they can go in and generate a bordereau themselves, so they can see at any time what they're on risk for. That's an option. Alternatively, at the end of the month or the end of the fortnight, you can generate the bordereau, the risk bordereau, and it will be generated in the Lloyd's standard template, so the current coverholder reporting standards, which are version 5.2 at the moment. And the beauty of the Workbench system is that all the mandated fields for that particular line of business and the territory that you're writing the business in will be populated. And that bordereau can be taken and successfully consumed without any rework or transformation into the Lloyd's data warehouse, which many of you will know as DA SATS, which is now being remodeled and rebranded as DDM, Delegated Data Manager.
One quick thing from a roadmap perspective, a strategic roadmap perspective, there is work underway to be able to consume bordereaux automatically. So right now, those of you that may know DDM or use DDM, you would generate the bordereau and then you kind of have to drag and drop it into DDM. There is work underway to basically make that process go away and to have more of a direct link via APIs or some other mechanism between Workbench and DDM, so that it's an kind of an end-to-end process.
Great, yeah, thanks, Mark. And any existing users of Workbench will clearly benefit from those APIs and those advancements. I just want to touch on accounting and settlement now for you. So what Coverholder Workbench is a full accounting and settlement system. Okay? It's not at the moment talking to sort of bank accounts. So when coverholders get paid the premium, the system doesn't know that it's been paid. So it is very much a cash matching system. So what happens is when you receive the premium that's paid to you, be that in an installment or a full payment, someone goes into the accounting area within Workbench, single sign-on, and they have to cash match that payment off against the account or the ledger for whom it's been paid from. It's normally a broker, right, or sometimes an insured directly if it's a big business that you're working with. Again, at the end of the reporting period, let's say that's at the end of the month, when you want to create a premium bordereau to report back on what's been paid, then you post all those transactions to the general ledger for that binder. That then creates your premium bordereau. And because you've entered the deductions, and because during onboarding, if there are any fixed commissions that you're working off, the system will know what it's expected to be paid, so that it can reconcile as closely as possible. We know it always doesn't reconcile completely with the risk bordereau. And again, they can be sent off to your Lloyd's broker or direct to your managing agent for processing through exchanging. If that's the way you're doing business and monies are moving through exchanging. So that is the demo of the front end of the Coverholder Workbench system. Okay, the end whereby an underwriter, someone who holds the pen, goes through the process from receiving a submission all the way through to completing a policy and creating the or being aware of the actions that happen downstream to create the bordereau for the Lloyd's reporting. I know we're not taking any questions right now, so we'll save them to the end, and I believe I'm handing back over to Tim now.
That's great. Thank you, Dex. It's great to see the system in that context, and hopefully the MGAA members will benefit from that overview. So in terms of benefits, could you talk us through and bring it to life in terms of the clients that are on Workbench, the benefits that they've realised and what that's enabled them to do differently, please, Dex? Or Mark, sorry.
All right.
Well, let's, yeah, Mark, you go first.
Yeah, thanks, Dex. Thanks for the demo. So I think the first couple of things, the benefits, as we kind of talked about at the beginning, is a different barrier to entry to actually kind of becoming a Lloyd's cover holder. The current users, it is a much more efficient process for them because it is basically compliant with Lloyd's from an end-to-end perspective. So they don't need to be too worried about, creating that bordereau. That bordereau is already kind of embedded and it's 5.2 compliant, both the risk and premium. The other part of it is from an audit perspective. Those of you that have been through audits know that there's a big part of the audit that is kind of technology-based, controls, things like that. Because we've kind of designed the ecosystem around Coverholder Workbench, from an assurance perspective, the audit is a much simpler audit. I'm not going to say it's a tick box exercise, but the fact that Coverholder Workbench is being used does provide much more kind of a quicker assurance on the audit step. We want to make sure that the controls in and around the workbench are, working, but from a technology perspective, that part of it kind of ticks the box. And the other is, like any system that has some level of integration, minimizes a lot of manual data entry or manual efforts, rekeying data, things like that. All the documents are in one place. You can find things. Even the thing at the beginning, the Kanban, which is an interesting thing. It looks a little daunting until you get used to it, but you can look across your business, across your entire book, or an underwriter can look across their desk and say, where are my files? Like where am I right now? What's outstanding, what's coming up for renewal, things like that. So it does sort of help manage workflow. And Dex, I'm sure that there's
I think just one more that I'll add there, Mark, is around the time to market. It is a quick to market solution. If you are you are an MGAA, a thoroughbred cover holder, and you want to bring online a new product, and you've got capacity provider, be that Lloyds or in the company market, and you need a system to manage those products or new risks, then if you use the Workbench system, we can build it out to you in a matter of weeks to get you trading with Lloyds and to get you reporting in to the required standard. So it's certainly an expedient way to get new products to market.
And one other benefit which we kind of realized through discussions is, especially for, everybody's got IT portfolios, budgeting process, backlogs of work. By using the Coverholder Workbench, as Dex said, you can kind of get into a line of business fairly quickly and, be kind of independent of some of the kind of annual planning process that you have to kind of we all have to deal with internally. You could get this up and running fairly quickly while you are waiting to become part of the core system within your respective organization. And it's easy in, easy out for Workbench. We can transition you out of it as well.
That's great. Thank you, Mark and Dex, for that. So the questions have started to come in. The first one I can see that jumps out to me is a question around future at Lloyds, Mark, which I know isn't the focus of today's session. So could you give us just a couple of sentences?
Yeah. So I'll kind of speak to the future at Lloyds and Blueprint too, kind of as one thing. The Coverholder Workbench is squarely part of the DA ecosystem within the future at Lloyds and Blueprint too. If you kind of think about it from left to right, the left side of the picture are basically the submitters of data into the ecosystem. The Coverholder Workbench is part of that ecosystem. It's being treated as both kind of friendly nation status and also as an independent thing. So when we start doing integrations and things like that, Coverholder Workbench will be part of that. Now, we also have the benefit of Coverholder Workbench will probably be one of the first things that we are able to integrate from end to end, because we have the most control over it, and we have the most, and we have a partnership with SQL on this, so we can kind of get there quicker. So, but Coverholder Workbench is part of the future at Lloyd's ecosystem. One thing I need to kind of say, which I'm stating honest, this is not a mandated system, right? We are not, it is completely voluntary. It is a product and service that we want to provide to the market, but it is purely voluntary.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. Another question for you, if I may, that's come in relation to company markets and how they can be supported on the platform, either from a follow or a lead perspective. Could you elaborate on that, please?
So for today, we will be able to provide support for company markets when they are participating in a binder. So if they are participants, they can be accommodated. We are not providing this for company market business only, for obvious reasons. But so that's kind of what we're doing. We would prefer that they be the follower, but we are open to discussion. Right now, we've only really been presented with scenarios where they are the follower. Dex, check me on that. That's correct?
That's
right?
that's right. Yeah, that's correct.
So that's kind of how we're supporting the company market.
Okay, thank you. Another question's come in response to your comment of barrier to entry and lowering that. I assume that's in relation to the cover holder approval process. So, Dex, did you want to talk about the benefits and expand upon how together we're lowering the barrier to entry through the workbench?
Yeah, of course. So I'm sure everyone knows that the approval process into Lloyds to become an approved cover holder can be quite a lengthy process. There are lots of checks that you go through to approve new cover holders. Part of the approval process is reviewing the system that the cover holder will be using to both write risks and report into Lloyds. Because the Cover Holder Workbench system is a Lloyds approved system, we've worked with the market and we've worked with the Delegated Authority team at Lloyds to ensure that it has the correct DA controls in place. Then that box is ticked and it reduces the time to approval by around 30%. It does pay dividend for new cover holders that sign up to Workbench.
One of the things we've also seen over the years, a small percentage of cover holders who don't make it through that process because of these system limitations. They may have had a good underwriting team. They may have had a good idea, a good product, but because of the system limitations, it didn't work out. That goes away if you use a cover holder workbench. That's
great, thank you. And also, questions come in around the commercials and the cost of cover holder workbench. Who does it cost and what does it cost?
So Marc. Yeah, in complete transparency, we are in the early days of rolling this out. So what we have agreed while we are taking it out for kind of a test drives for the next year to two, for a number of cover holders, the workbench will be provided pro bono. There will be costs later. The costs will be reasonable. We are working out the pricing model. It will be somewhere in the neighborhood of £9,000 to £15,000 per year. We don't know exactly where that's going to dial in yet. So right now, we've got approval from our senior management to provide it for up to a certain number of cover holders pro bono. If we get there in 6 months, great. If we get there in a year, fine. But really, that's what we're doing. As part of that, though, those cover holders are going to be required is a strong word, but required to become part of the user community to help us ensure that we are on the right track, that it does do what's needed, and to provide kind of feedback both to us and to Tim to just basically ensure the product is the best it can be. And if we need to make changes, we can accommodate those. So that's kind of, there's a quid pro quo.
That's great. Thank you, Marc. And Dex, there's been a question come in about the onboarding process and asking for more information on that. And a loosely related question in terms of the config and onboarding is the document format of the quote output. Can we also provide PDF? So if you could cover both aspects in terms of onboarding overview and the options for config, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, sure. So I'll cover off on onboarding first. So there are a number of stages to onboarding. We do the initial analysis with the cover holder to ensure that they are a suitable adopter. That involves a qualification as well just to make sure that what they need is what would be delivered through the cover holder workbench system. And then, all being well, we then go through the sort of data gathering stage where we are asking you for templates, document templates. We're asking for copies of the rating matrix. We are asking you for the makeup of the binder, what the lines are, who the markets are. in order to build the products out and to ensure that it's reported on correctly. We then hand over in a formal way to our partners at SQL, because SQL are the software vendor that we really partnered with to actually do the build. So they build, configure the products. They work with the cover holder through the testing and the training phases of onboarding before the cover holder goes live with the system. In terms of the documentation, yeah, it's dynamic. We can produce it in Word so that you can actually edit it yourself, or if you're comfortable with PDFs coming out from the system, again, that is an option. And they are the types of questions that we go through during the onboarding stage. Typically, from initial approach through to go live, 3 to 4 months. It can be quicker depending upon the requirements, and we try to aim for the inception of the binder as closely as we can to go live, so that you're using the system to write new business from the inception of that binder.
Thank you, Dex. And to carry on the onboarding theme, there's 2 other questions. One, who is responsible for onboarding? Is that a cover holder responsibility, SQL or Lloyds? And from a commercial perspective, is the onboarding activity also free of charge, or is there a cost to the cover holder for onboarding the product?
Let me answer the second question first. Right now, the onboarding cost is borne by Lloyds, so there is no cost for onboarding yet. As we kind of go through this, we do have to ensure that this is commercially viable for everyone, so we do want to kind of just put that out there. Now, that being said, if there is a set of documents or requirements or what have you that sort of start to become a bit more complicated or a bit more involved than we had kind of initially thought, we would sit down and have a discussion about that and try and come to, an equitable arrangement, just to ensure that we are being fair across the piece, both to Lloyds, to the cover holder, and to SQL. So we just kind of want to put it out there. And Dex, I can't remember what the first question was.
Back to the first question. So I've kept it up there. Around the parties involved with onboarding. So it's not just a case of sort of handing over the onboarding material to SQL and letting them go through the motions. There's a number. There's Lloyd clearly doing those identification, qualification stages. SQL with the build of the system for the customer. The cover holder will be involved in that journey as well, as we go through the stage gates to ensure that what's being built is what's required. I'd also say that your Lloyd's broker should be along for the journey as well, so that they are aware of the changes to the systems and the processes that will be taking place, so they're ready for that. And the syndicates as well. We need to make sure that they're informed, so that they take advantage of a cover holder that they have on their books coming onto Workbench, because they will get a lot more data made available to them from cover holders using Workbench. It's not just the border error anymore. It's enriched data that's going to be made available. Things like quote to bind ratios, technical versus offered prices. They'll be able to get a snapshot of the EPI for the rest of the year if they want to. So these are the types of reports, and there are bespoke reports that can be made that come as part of the Workbench package that's being offered out. So Lloyds, SQL, the cover holder, the broker, and any syndicates will be involved through the journey.
And I know I'm stating the obvious, the most important constituent in that is the cover holder. They are the most important one. They're it will, the more engagement, the better engagement we have with the cover holder, the faster and the better the implementation and configuration will be. Anybody who's been through a system implementation, any kind of system project, knows this. So what Lloyds doesn't want to get in the position of is we want to make sure that we are delivering right the first time. Then that's going to be partly on us, partly on the cover holder.
Just conscious of the time, just a reminder that any questions that we don't get to answer during the session, we will follow up in writing afterwards. I've got another couple of minutes of questions. They are coming through thick and fast before I hand over to Julia at the end just to wrap up the session. So just talking about data, Dex, there's been a couple of questions around who has access to the data, who owns it, and are there management information packs provided to the capacity providers? So I don't know if that's best for you, Dex, or Mark, if you want to touch on the management information sort of strategy, and probably a pertinent question, who owns the data? Is it the cover holder, or is it the broker, is it the syndicate?
Well, Lloyds does not own the data. So we are basically caretakers of it, and that's it. We ensure that there's a proper ecosystem around the data. The ownership of the data between cover holder, managing agent, broker is exactly as it would be today if you were using any other system. So I know it's kind of I'm not meaning to be evasive, but I think that there are probably some unique agreements within the market around who's got access to certain types of data within each agreement. So what I'm saying is we will ensure that the data is secure and only authorized users have access to it according to whatever is agreed upon. But it's not Lloyd. So we cannot, will not take the data and do our own analysis. That's not what we would do. If we were going to do any analysis, it would just be around usage of Workbench, how's it being used, those kinds of things for kind of our own metrics. But as far as underwriting data, no, we would never touch that, and we don't do today.
That's great. Thank you, Mark.
We don't host it. It's not hosted by Lloyds. This is hosted, Tim can speak to that. It's hosted within a SQL world.
Yep. Well, thank you, Mark. That brings us to the top of the hour. So I just want to put personal notes. We at SQL very much value the partnership with Lloyds. We're proud to be involved in Coverholder Workbench. And thank you both Mark and Dex for attending today. So without further ado, I'll hand back to Julia and extend our thanks to Julia as well and the MGAA for inviting us to participate in this webinar. And Julia, if you'd like to wrap up the session with any remaining sort of housekeeping tasks. But thank you again.
Thanks, Tim. And thanks to Dex and Mark and of course SQL for our webinar today. Really informative, really detailed, but I really like the benefits, particularly the audit benefits, reducing duplicate keying, workflow management, time to market, all very pertinent points. I've just got the learning objectives up on the screen again, but it just leaves me to say thank you once again to all. Thank you to everyone for joining, and please do complete the feedback survey that will be issued after the event. The presentation will be uploaded to our YouTube channel and to our website. So thank you all again for joining us. Thank you.